Hi, this is Scott Bradfield, and this is episode 20-something of Reading Great Books in the Bathtub. If you've been following this series sequentially, and I don't recommend that you do, because there's no sequence to it, I've spent the past several months reading Ulysses in the bathtub, and I'm exhausted. And it was large parts of that was just hard work. I was not fulfilling the premise of this class, which is you really should be enjoying every moment. There was huge bathtubs worth of water that I wish I hadn't wasted on certain passages in Ulysses again. And I'm a little tired. I'm glad I did it. I don't want to ever do it again. I've decided at my age I don't have to read Ulysses ever again the rest of my life. So I'm taking a break. Before I dive into another difficult book, I thought we'd take a couple weeks and take a break. And so this week, instead of reading a great book in the bathtub, I thought I would read a story of mine that came out. So it's not a great book. It's not in the bathtub. I do have a glass of bourbon. I recommend either a bathtub or a glass of bourbon when you're reading for pleasure. That's another recommendation. You can take it or leave it, like the rest of this series. I'm reading a story today, just came out in an anthology edited by Gordon Van Gelder, who used to edit Fantasy and Science Fiction, a magazine I grew up reading. It's called Welcome to Dystopia. And about a year ago, shortly after the disastrous election of 2016, for God's sakes, Gordon Van Gelder went out and sent a letter out to basically every writer in the world. I think there's 50 people, 45 to 50 people in this. So yeah, I was one of the many writers in the world. He sent a request for a brief story trying to envision the dystopian future shortly after the Trump election. Now, I've never before replied to one of these types of assignments. They're kind of common in anthologies where an editor comes up with an idea and he asks people to write a story based on this idea. And I find that very difficult for me. I can't really even get my head around it. But I thought, what the hell? I thought the world was coming to an end, as I'm still pretty sure it's going to do. And I decided to I couldn't think of a dystopian vision. First of all, I'm not interested in fiction as predictive and what will happen next sort of thing. I decided I would try to find a way into this assignment, and my first instinct was to write kind of a revenge fantasy in a way, which is to look at the dystopian future of Mike Pence, who's just to me a most appalling human being, just basically a puppet figure for the Koch brothers and people like that. And I just thought I would write a story. What would be the worst thing that could possibly happen to Mike Pence in the future? And this is a brief story. I'm just reading it as a break from Ulysses. And the story is called The Passion According to Mike. You need my glasses. On the day Vice President Mike Pence awoke from a 2-year regenerative slumber in the green room of the General Electric Eternalization Clinic in downtown Indianapolis, he felt as fresh as a new-blossomed daisy. He sat up in a soft bed amongst celestially billowing white sheets and blankets to a room smelling of lavender, jasmine, and a faint hint of cinnamon. And when he swung himself out from under the covers, he found his legs to be as tawny, well-shaven, and supple as the legs of a young girl. "Hallelujah," he said, to nobody in particular. "I feel like $1 million." Which is when the white door opened and a beautiful, oval-faced woman with bronze skin entered, bearing a tall glass filled with thickish green liquid on a gleaming steel tray. "Accounting for inflation," she said with a smile, "that would come to about $1 billion at today's rates, sweetie." Mike could vaguely remember the last frantic moments of his former life. There had been something about an earthquake, and then another earthquake, and then a flood, and then a tornado, and then another flood, all frequent, God-ordained natural occurrences on a normal Indianapolis afternoon during the first 1,000 days. Then, just as suddenly, He was being hurried through crowds of protesters, bricks and tomatoes flying around, choking on a dark haze of pepper spray and marijuana smoke. Something struck his head, and then something else struck his head, and Mike turned to see the angry face of his last still-functioning Secret Service bot wielding a freshly dented stop sign on a wooden 2x4. "I will not work for $5 an hour," the robot was shouting. "I will not work for $5 an hour." And then, as if the plug had been pulled, Mike fell crashing into the strong, blissful arms of his lord. "Here, drink this," the beautiful woman said. It tasted like seaweed, cornstarch, and aqua velva. "I'd prefer a Diet Coke," he said. Who wouldn't? Her smile was like a box of chiclets. Unfortunately, since the anti-GMO forces took control of the state legislatures, no can do. Anyway, these kale smoothies are packed with all the vitamins your newly awakened brain needs to get it back into high gear. Speaking of which, how's that genetically reconstructed bod working for you? Mike ran his hand slowly down his hairless chest and legs. He had lost weight, and his musculature was smooth and supple. Then, between his legs, he found something that hadn't been there before, and something that wasn't quite the same as it had been. The new hermaphroditic functions always take a little getting used to, the beautiful dark-skinned woman said. But eventually, you'll learn to love your flexible new multi-gender pleasure devices just like everybody else. The next time Mike awoke, he found himself sitting in a softly unfocused white room surrounded by softly unfocused, attractive young people wearing softly unfocused, celestial white robes. Enya, or something soothingly similar, was playing on the overhead speakers. "This is more like it," Mike said, relaxing into his plush Barcalounger. One face came into focus from the cluster of other faces. It was the dark-skinned, beautiful woman from his earlier dream. "We gave you an herbal sedative, Mike. My name's Gabriella. Now why don't we take a look-see around your new world?" Everybody seemed to be humming the soft rock Christian music Mike enjoyed playing in his Bose wireless headphones while reading the Bible and signing executive orders. "Seek ye first the kingdom of God," Mike whispered, "and all these things will be added unto you, da-da-da-da-da." "Absolutely, Mike," Gabriella said, and took him gently by the arm. "Now, just keep thinking those good thoughts, and we won't have to sedate you again." Outside, everything was similarly unfocused and billowy, with young, sexually ambiguous people floating back and forth down long corridors that stretched in every direction like the visual conundrums of an Escher drawing. Basically, your drug-enhanced virtual receptors interpret the world by means of your Gestalt ordering mechanisms. With new, improved AccuU, produced by the good people at Pfizer, you literally see what you believe. And the best part of it all? It's free, since Pfizer is now a wholly owned subsidiary of the FDA, and the FDA, of course, is owned by you, the taxpayer. Now that you've been paying your fair share of taxes since your suspension, Mike, but don't worry. With the new universal basic income established during the first intercession, we probably owe you money. Mike was feeling wobbly and unrehearsed, as if he had stepped onto a stage where he was expected to deliver lines that he couldn't remember from a play he had never read. "For example," Gabriella said, "my field of perception perceives green fields littered with non-GMO fruit trees, gleaming blue lakes and streams, and clean blue skies unmarked by industrial pollutants. Isn't that great? You get to see what you want to see, and I get to see what I want to see. And who cares if you're perceptually enhanced and I'm not? It doesn't matter in the long run of history, right? So long as we're both happy." Several boyish girls and girlish boys ran past, giggling, and Mike felt a strange, indefinable sense of pleasure lift up between his legs. It reminded him of the first time, as a 12-year-old boy, he had seen Anita Bryant singing about oranges on television. Take your pick, Mike. Sex isn't nasty or ungodly. It's productive, especially since we started using our wombs to manufacture stem cells for the biolabs in California. Our sexual parts aren't simply hedonistic pleasure centers or baby makers anymore. We've all been turned into walking, talking genetic labs. So don't be shy, Mike. Want to make stem cells together? Your place or mine? Mike had to sit down. He needed a glass of water and, with a blink of awareness, found one materializing in his hand. Underneath him, the stool morphed into a cordially shaped Barcalounger, just like the one in the Reawakening Center a couple dreams back. Try to relax, Mike. Today's election day, and you know what that means? The 12-hour Super Bowl. We figured it was a kinder, gentler way of keeping the white, male-oriented guys from voting. And hey, after the 12-hour Super Bowl, they're running a Dog the Bounty Hunter marathon on CNN. A billboard-sized television screen materialized in the fuzzy white air, depicting large, well-breasted men in heavy shoulder protectors bashing into one another like gently jostling balloons in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. It looked the way hell was supposed to look, according to Mike's darkest dreams of it. A whole lot of confusion, softness, inspecificity, and casual petting. The sense of pleasure between Mike's legs grew into a small, mild erection, while, at the same time, something opened damply inside him, as if his anus was being pulled inside out. His mouth went dry and moist, both at the same time. But what about, him, our leader? When Gabriella smiled, she looked like an angel. But wasn't that the work of Satan? To make you see what you wanted to see and not to see what was really going on. Frankly, she was a little disappointed when we turned her property holdings into free health care clinics for the latest influx of Mexican-American workers busing up from Juarez. But no matter. She'll get used to it. She's got one of the best cross-gender imams in the business helping her adjust to the new world order. But then, so do you, Mike. So do you. That's our episode. I'll be back. We'll try to come up with something a little more dense and complicated for next week.